Hello everyone! Thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn served by the FileMaker team at Cross IT. Before we dig in, remember that you have a chance to win lunch on us if you leave a comment or ask a question during the live stream. That means we'll send you a gift card. In response to recent questions, today's topic is FileMaker Server's command line interface. Take it away, Todd.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Again, welcome everybody. As Kristen mentioned, this is a result of some questions that were posed to us, so we thought it would be good to dig into the FileMaker server command line and just kind of go over some of those commands that we use often and that have helped us out in our journey. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get our Windows remote desktop connection here over front and center because I'm going to be actually working on a FileMaker server that's running on Windows Server 2016. So let's go ahead and for those of you that are not familiar with the command line, there's a couple ways that you can do it. I get to it often enough. I actually put the shortcut there, in the toolbar here at the bottom. But if you go to search and then just start typing CMD, it'll bring up the command prompt. And then you just double click and then you're in. All right, so the command line, all of the commands that you're going to be running start with FMS Admin, just like so, which obviously is FileMaker Server Admin, so it's pretty easy to remember. And then there's usually some type of type that you then declare, as well as some additional options and things like that. So the only one that you really need to remember, in my opinion, is this one right here, which is FMS Admin help commands. Because what that does is when you run it, it will actually pull up a list of all of those different types or those subsets of the command that you can use. And then once you know that, okay, this is the one that I want, you just would retype that command, help, and then you would put in that name of the command, and then you get help that is specific to the task that you're trying to accomplish. All right, so I pulled up the list function. This is one that's not critical, certainly, but it does give you some information. Now, some of the things that you're able to get here, as you can see from the help, is that you're able to pull up lists of clients, files, plugins that are installed on server if you're using server-side scripts that use plugins, as well as a list of the schedules. Most of that stuff, obviously, you can get if you're in the Claris FileMaker Server admin console. But there's a few of the other commands that you use when you're in the command line that reference things by number. And so by using list, you'll be able to figure out, what those things are. So if I were to just go ahead and list clients, it's going to ask me for, oops. And you can see that I have, one user, it's been given the client ID of 41. If I run that same command, I'm going to use the shortcut key to go back to the last command. And then I'm just going to switch and go files. Get some information here on the files that are currently hosted on my FileMaker server. Okay. And you can see it gives you, the full path, so you know where the file is stored and things like that. Now, this one here is one of those ones that has an additional option or modifier, if you will. So if I go back to that and if I put -s, or you can do the -- stats for the statistics, it will give you a much more complete picture. And then you can see it gives you all of the files, because there's actually one file that is on the server, but it's closed currently. It also gives you, you get the size, you can see what the enabled extended privileges are, whether the file's encrypted or not. So you get a little bit more information. The same way if you use the -s when you use the client one, you would also get some more information, about that client. Now there's another command that I have to admit I don't use very often, just because I typically look at everything in the list and use the, the detailed view, if you will. But there is one that's called status. Let's go ahead and take a look at that one is. And then once you do the list, one of the modifiers is whether you want to look at clients or you want to look at files. So if I want to get the status of client, and this is where that number comes into play, and since we can still see it on the screen there, we're going to get the stats on client 41. Now when I put that in there, after putting the username and password, you'll see that I definitely get a lot more information. That it's the same client, but I can see that he's opened 2 different files. I can see what those files are, information about the IP address and the MAC address and the connection time and all of those kinds of things. So it gives me a more complete picture. If I would do the same thing on the status of the file, I'm going to see the same thing that I saw when I ran the list with those additional details. So that's a good one just to keep in mind. Okay. The next one we want to look at is this one. Spell it correctly. That's always the key here when you're working in the command lines. You got to make sure you're typing things correctly. And that is disconnect. And the main reason why you would want to look at this one, because again, this is another command that you can do in the admin console to see who the users are and disconnect them from files. It doesn't happen as often now with the newer versions of FileMaker Server, but I can remember the days when the admin console would become unresponsive. So you needed to be able to disconnect the users gracefully when you didn't have access to that admin console. So that's where this command line comes in to play. It again works by the client number. However, if you put in FMS Admin disconnect, it's just going to disconnect all users. Or you can specify, the client by the number. Again, I'm not going to disconnect that, but you get the idea. All right. So that's there. You can also send a message if you wanted to, and that would be, you would have -M, and then you would put, this is some message. All right, so you're able to do that, and it would give them the dialog that pops up saying, hey, you're about to be disconnected from this file. All right, so very good stuff. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead and jump into a few commands here that are, I consider them pairs. I think it's going to be pretty obvious based on the names of the types. Why I consider them pairs is because you have one that will let you open files, another one that's going to let you close the files. All right. So if I were to go to FMS Admin open, all right, and then from there, obviously I want to be able to specify, the name of the file that I want to open. And again, this is something you can do by, if you just give it just a path, it will open the files that are in that folder. If you specify by number, obviously that's going to help you out, because typically if you were to go ahead and open a file, you would have to go ahead and type out the full path. Okay, and just to help me out here, I got a couple paths that I just threw into Notepad so that I can just quickly come over here and copy them, paste them in, so you guys don't have to watch me painfully type all of that stuff out. All right, it didn't like that, and we'll just paste it again because I don't want to have to go back. All right, so there is our, I'm telling it to open this file. This is a file that's obviously in a the non-default location for FileMaker on my E drive. But what you'll notice that even though that I'm on a Windows machine, I'm still putting in the / as my path separator as opposed to the \. That was something that took me a little while to figure out. I couldn't figure out, why aren't you opening this file? I can see it right there, and that was the reason why. So if I just go ahead and run this command, it's going to again ask me for username and password. And now this particular file, I know it's going to try to open it, but it didn't open it for a reason that we're going to cover in just a little bit. So I'm going to tell you when you're older. Okay, so that is open. Close. Now are also a couple little things that you have options with the open command. That is, you can specify if it's an encrypted file, you can also include the encryption key in your command, because obviously it's going to need that to be able to open. And then there's also a flag that you can set so that it remembers that encryption key, just like you do when you're opening a file from the admin console. You're able to do that from here. All right. So, like I said, close is another one. It's, like I said, it's kind of the companion to that. Works with the same thing. You FMS Admin close. And again, you can specify, by file. You can like the full path. Again, here's one that we can take a look at here. Let's copy and paste that. Come down here. Let's go ahead and paste that in. Oh, there we go. And then so now I've got close. Now there's a couple things that I can do here. Is that there is a -T, which sets the grace time, because it's going to default to 90 seconds. So if you want to give the person a warning, maybe give them 2 minutes or 5 minutes as to whether they want to close the file before it's forcibly closed, you can go in and do a -T and then put in the number of seconds. So if you want to do 180 seconds, you're able to do that for 3 minutes. Okay. Just similarly, you can go ahead and do something where you've got the -F or the -M, I should say, if you want to again give them a message. And the last one, which is usually the one that I use most often when I'm working in to close files via the command line, is the -F modifier, which is to force it. Because usually by the time I get to the admin or the command line interface, the users have had plenty of opportunities to close the files gracefully, and I'm just kicking them out because there's something that I need to do. All right, so -F. So like I said, that's the one. And obviously if you're forcing them out, that is going to override. Even if you set a grace period and a message, it's going to ignore that and just force the files to close. All right, so if we run that one, not sure why things are being sluggish here today. But yes, I do want to close it. All right, and it's admin and pass. And it's going to echo back. It says the file is closing, and now the file is closed. Okay, so good stuff. All right, so that's open and close. Now you're probably asking, I can do all of that from the admin console. Why do I want to be able to do that from a command line? Well, there are instances where you may want to have a batch script or a system level script that's going to close the files, allow you to run updates on your operating system or whatever the case may be, reboot the server, and then have it gracefully then open those files when you're done. And that's where using these commands in that batch script is going to be what you use. Okay, those are the tools that you have. Okay, so with that, the next kind of pair that we have is start and stop. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and do the help for us on this one, just so you can kind of see what the different options are. I apologize. I don't know. This is a test server that's not doing anything else, and yet it's being very sluggish on me today. All right, so it's FMS Admin start, and then you just specify the type, whether you have a server type or a process type, which is the admin server, which is what drives the admin console. And then, of course, the server is the database server itself. And then you get into the processes, which are for the FileMaker script engine, the FileMaker server progressive backup, the ODBC JDBC connection, the web publishing engine, and then of course the one that's the newest as of the last couple versions, which is the FileMaker Data API. Now you'll notice that there's a note down there that this server process that you're starting or stopping is separate from the service that is running on your Windows system. I ran into this because most of my experience had been on Macs. So a while back, one of the first Windows servers that I was upgrading FileMaker, I came into the command line, I closed all the files, I stopped everything, went to run the updates for FileMaker server, and it said FileMaker server is still running. I was like, but I just stopped it. Well, the reason why is I'd stopped the server process here, but I had not actually stopped the FileMaker server service that you get to under the the Windows Server Services control panel and everything. So just be aware that those are two different things, and obviously these commands are not going to work unless that service is running. So just be aware of that. So that's start. Same with stop. It's going to have the exact same types, but the biggest difference here is that you're going to now have some options as to whether you want to send a message with some grace time, or if you want to force the process to stop. Okay, so just like I said, very similar, just a couple differences there because of those different options that you have. The other one that you have is the FMS Admin. I'm going to go ahead and pull the help up again here, which is restart. If I can, again, see you got to type correctly, everybody. FMS Admin. Help restart. And so what that does, it's these the same processes and same options as you have in the stop. However, what it's going to do is it's going to gracefully shut that process down, give it a few milliseconds, and then it's going to restart it back up. And that has, I've used that on a few occasions, where if something happens with the FileMaker script engine that, things have started acting a little squirrely, and that is the technical term, they started acting squirrely, is you just want to go ahead and restart that process without having to reboot your entire FileMaker server. You're able to come in and just do a quick restart on that individual server process, which is very handy. And again, you've got the same, the force and the message and the seconds, as far as that message, but that is only going to apply if you're actually restarting the server process itself. Okay, because that's obviously going to disconnect users, where some of the other process types, are not. They may affect some users, but it's not going to affect your entire system. All right, so that is restart. The next couple are enable and disable. Okay, and there's a couple new options here. Originally, I think it was just for some of your schedules. All right, so it's here. There we go. I'm going to start with, I'm actually going to go in reverse order. FMS Admin disable. And what you have is the types are schedules, or just schedule actually. And then you also have the client stats, server stats, or the top call stats, which deal with logging things that are happening in the system as far as those client statistics, server statistics, or your top call statistics. Okay. And so that's where, again, especially with these processes or the scheduled scripts or your backups, all of those schedules, I mean, you can manage that through the admin console, except for the default backup. Okay, that backup is, it's just set, but it is usually at noon. Or excuse me, midnight, there we go. It's usually at midnight, but that may not fit into the scheme or the time of day that it needs to happen because of, maybe a late shift that works, past 11, or just other things that are going on in the system that you maybe just want to turn that default schedule off, and so that you can create all of your own backup schedules. Okay, I mean, it's great that it's there because you certainly want to have backups, and this guarantees that you have some backups by default. But again, it may not fit your backup schedule. So you're able to go in and just say FMS Admin disable schedule, and we'll say schedule 1 because I know that's the default one. Go ahead and hit return here. It says, do I really want to disable it? The answer is yes. And then admin and password. All right. All right. And so then it goes ahead and pulls up the information to show me that yes, it did disable that particular process. But we don't want to be without backups, so I can go ahead and just run the same command, or its companion command. And now you see is that backup schedule is now re-enabled. Okay. Like I said, again, you get into your client stats, server stats, top call stats. because usually having those on all the time just it balloons the log files and is probably not what's needed for day-to-day stuff. But if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem, this is where you're able to come in and go ahead and enable those things as needed. Okay, that brings us to the ones that are probably the most complex, just because there's so many options. Okay, and there's also a couple in here that are the ones that I use quite often, and that is there's a get option or a get type, and there's also a set type. So what you're doing, as you might guess, you are either getting information about your server configuration, or are you setting those things about that server configuration. So there's 3 different types that you can use. So we got FMS Admin, get, and you can get backup time is one of the options. And what that does is if you don't use a number, it's going to go to the default, of course. And I can pull up and it says, okay, my start time is at 12 a.m. Okay, so that's the kind of the first one, is about those backup times, if you want to check and see what those are. The next one is FMS Admin get, and it's server config is all one word. Okay, and as you might guess, it's getting you your server configuration information. Now there are individual server configuration settings that you can get information about. However, you just enter it like this. What it will do is it's going to go ahead and return all of the values for you all at once. Okay, so you can see here it's telling you what the setting is, as far as the name, gives you what its value is, and then it's also just giving you a hint as to what the range of that setting could be, so you know whether you're at the default or not, and what the range could be. All right, so it's giving you obviously the backup interval for your progressive backups. If there's a pause time that's in there, what your cache size is, or that available RAM from the system that is available for the FileMaker processes, the number of hosted files that the server is going to be able to support, the size of the log file, how many FileMaker Pro connections you're going to allow, how many script sessions are going to be allowed to run simultaneously if you're using perform script on server in your solutions, things like that, whether you're able to host secure files only. This is one setting that has changed recently. It used to default to false, and what that would do would be allow you to put a FileMaker server file on your server that had a full access account that did not have a password. Okay, and that is the reason why the one file that I tried to open would not let me open, was for that very reason. Is because I don't have a password on that full access account, so it said not going to happen. So if it's a case where I really need that file to be open, I can go ahead, I can come in here and I can change that setting, but this will at least let me see what that setting is. You can also set it to whether the server is discoverable on the network to outside the LAN, and then of course there's a stats interval for how often it's going to go ahead and capture those statistics and things and then report them to the log. Okay, so those are the again the server config settings that you can get. The other one is the CWP config. And again, it works the same way. If you want to get a specific value, you can go ahead and add that here. But if you just put it in there blank, see if I can type correctly. All right. Oh, it must be because I closed the file that actually uses or the potential of using the custom web publishing. All right, so now that the file is open, let's try our git config again. Okay. I'm at a loss, folks. I have no idea why that is happening to me. So I'm going to have to put that on my list of homework and get an answer for you at a future lunch and learn. So we're just going to go ahead and move on. And so that was the get. Let's go ahead and take a look at the set function. Okay. Like for example, if I wanted to change my backup time, because maybe midnight really doesn't work for me, but if we could do something at 2 in the morning, that would be ideal. I can just go ahead and enter it as military time. And I typed the password or the name wrong. Okay, and now it's echoing back and saying, okay, that first schedule for your backup time is now 2 a.m. So I'm able to get in and change that from the default if I need to. Similarly, we got the server config. All right, now this one here is obviously, you're not going to be able to set all the settings at once just like that, but you can go ahead and say, okay, if I want to go ahead and say, change my cache size, and I'm going to make that 2048, because everything should be multiples of 1024. You're just going to sleep better at night, trust me. And then you can, typically I just do it one line at a time, but you are able to specify multiple name value pairs here as you're setting your server. So we'll go ahead and change that one to false, just in case, since I do want to go ahead and open that file at some point. All right, it's going to ask me for username and password. And then it comes back and says that, again, it shows you what the default is, what the range is, and then it's going to show you what you've just set it to, so you know that those settings have been accepted. Okay, so again, you've got your backup time, your server config, your custom web publishing config, which it deals with whether you're going to enable, the custom web publishing for PHP, for XML, what encoding you're going to use. What language the error messages are going to be returned in, also whether you're going to use the default, the FileMaker's PHP, or if you're going to use your own. So there's some settings that you would be able to get in there and take a look at. And then the last one, which is one that I use more often now than I actually need to, and that is the FMS Admin certificate. And actually, I'm just going to go ahead and do the help on that. And what this is this is all about the things that you need when you're creating a certificate signing request, because you want to get a custom SSL certificate for your FileMaker server. Until just recently, the only way to generate that CSR was to come in to here. You would use FMS Admin, create as the option, and then you would go ahead and give it the DNS name of the server, its location, city, state, some additional information as far as like the password and things like that you were going to use to encrypt the key file. But luckily, this is another thing that FileMaker has taken now and moved into the admin console. So if you go to admin console, click on the link to add the certificate, you can actually create your signing request right there through the interface. So it's a lot easier to do, because you don't have to worry about mistyping anything when you create the request and stuff like that. But just because I'm so used to doing it this way, I usually find myself back in the command line interface rather than going ahead and using the tool that they give us in the admin console. So you can just kind of pick and choose which way you want to go. All right, so there's a few other commands in here that we've haven't covered, but these are the ones that are very common, and certainly ones that have gotten me out of some different jams that I found myself in over the last, I guess, 20 years I've been using FileMaker. So I think with that, we can check and see if there are any questions.
I think I have one question. How often do you use the command line interface?
I'm going to hedge my bets and say that it depends. It's one of those things where, when you need it, the most important thing is to just know that it exists. because you may run into a situation where that's the only way to accomplish the task that you want to try to get done or need to get done. Obviously, if you can do things through the admin console, that's where you're going to want to work, just because it is graphical and easier to see what's happening. So usually setting up a new server, I use the command line for two things. Actually, I think just the certificate creation, which we just looked at, which I don't have to do anymore. And then the other thing is just setting that the cache size, because it defaults to 512 megs. Typically most servers are going to have quite a bit more memory, and you're going to want to make that available for your FileMaker server. So that's primarily when I use it, is when I'm setting up a new server. And hopefully there are no other problems, and then you don't need it. So
great. Okay, second question. How do you handle the user prompts when using these commands in a batch or system file?
Okay, that is a great question. Let's go ahead and go back to the desktop here so we can take a look. And there are a couple flags that you're able to use, because you'll notice, and I'm just going to pick a simple command to look at, just because it's going to be faster for me to type. But if we go FMS Admin list, I forgot to tell it I wanted to list the files. Okay, you see it prompts for the username, which I have to type in, and the password. Now, if I were to do that same command, and if I put -u for username and put in my username, come on, catch up, there we go. And then -p is the flag for the optional password, you can see is the very secure password. And then, like if I want, and then you can still use the other modifiers. Like if I want to get more of the statistics here, I'm able to just go ahead and go in. There we go. And then now it did not prompt me for my username and password. It just brought me right to this. So that's how you would handle it in the batch file, is you would just use those flags. And obviously you would have to be familiar with which commands are going to prompt you, which ones are not, so that you can set it up correctly. Looks like we had another question that just came in. Looks like which is which of these commands lend themselves to integrating with a FileMaker Pro server control app? That is another good question. I would have to say, obviously like the open and close could potentially enable and disable, possibly, because typically, when, at least in my mind, the way I'm thinking about controlling things is that if you're trying to do stuff on server, those would be the things that you would want to do, would be to maybe open additional files, close additional files. Also, maybe restarting a process might be something that you would want to change. I mean, typically, you're not going to change, the cache size or some of those server settings in the middle while it's running with users. But I would say probably the ones that affect the users, you could probably get very creative and just send messages, because that's one of the things that you're able to do through the command line, is you can create a message that would then go out. So, like I said, I don't know if that answers the question, but in at least how I interpreted the question, that was the answer. And there's a lot of resources that are out there. Like I said, this was just kind of give you like a 10,000 foot view of what's possible with the command line interface. There is a complete help, at Claris.com that goes over this, and then I'm sure there's other white papers and things that are out there to help narrow down if you're looking to do a specific task. So I guess with that, I think that's all I have to talk about today. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen.
Okay, we have a few upcoming events that we'd like to mention as we close. First, if you're in the Pittsburgh area and want to talk to FileMaker with like-minded individuals, please consider joining FMBurg, the Pittsburgh FileMaker Developer Group. at our next meetup on Wednesday, November 3rd at 6:30 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting, so if you can't join us in person, you can always log in and join us remotely. Second, due to the upcoming holidays, we are only offering one Lunch and Learn in November. Please tune in on Wednesday, November 17th at noon to hear Todd discuss the while function in Claris FileMaker and offer his insight. Again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. If you like what you saw and heard, please click the thumbs up and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, we humbly ask that you do. You can also hit the bell to get notified. The topic for today's Lunch and Learn is in response to questions from our viewers. If you have a suggestion for a future topic, or if you have a specific FileMaker problem just has you stumped, please submit those topics and questions by emailing us at nutshell@crossit.com. Your idea or question may be featured as a topic of a future Lunch and Learn. From all of us at CrossIT, we are glad to have served you. Have a great day.